Hello and welcome to the Builders Hive interview series brought to you from the National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. I am your host Anushka Sharda, and today we are thrilled to have with us Professor Mark Alexander, who has traveled all the way from Cape Town, Africa, to share his invaluable insights with us. Professor Alexander is an emeritus professor, a senior research scholar, and a professional engineer, also a former president of Concrete Society of Southern Africa, with a wealth of knowledge and expertise in concrete and cement materials engineering. He is also a past president of Rylam, an international organization dedicated to research in materials and structures. With his extensive contribution to the field of design and construction, he is an extensively published and widely read author, recognized globally for his work. We are delighted to have Professor Alexander with us today to learn from his rich experience in concrete durability, service life prediction, concrete sustainability, and repair and rehabilitation of deteriorated concrete structures. So let's dive into the conversation and gain some valuable insights from one of the best in the business. Different place altogether, Africa. So you went to like a college, different, like you did major and all. So can you tell us more about it?
About where I studied?
Yes.
I was born and brought up in Johannesburg, which is the biggest city in South Africa. And there's a very big and historic university there called the University of the Witwatersrand. That word Witwatersrand refers to the place where they found the gold.
Gold.
Because it's called the City of Gold. That's where I went, that's where I studied, because it was the obvious place for me to go. My parents did not have money to send me further away and pay for my board or going to a hostel or something. So I went to the university in my hometown. That was the most convenient. But it was an excellent university, a very good university, and I had a very good education there.
So how did you get interested in this field of
as civil engineering?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, I think I always wanted to do something in engineering, but I wasn't sure which branch of engineering. And before I went to university, I more or less settled on electrical engineering. But just the vacation before I went to university, I worked in a structural detailing office, mainly structural steel.
Okay.
And I found that quite interesting. Most people wouldn't find a structural detailing office very interesting, but I found it interesting. And at the last moment, I switched from electrical to civil.
Is electrical integrated to civil engineering?
No, it's a different field of study. I mean, we have the major engineering: civil, mechanical, electrical, chemical. So I switched from electrical to civil, and I must say I'm very glad I did. Yeah.
Since you're such an accomplished professor, so you have inspired many, right? So who is that one person you have you look up to or you took inspiration from throughout this journey?
There are many, actually. I wouldn't say there's just one. My own master's and PhD supervisor was a very inspirational guy. He was a real world scholar, world-renowned scholar. A very brilliant man, and he pushed me to the limits. He insisted that I do my very best, and so I tried to. So he was a great inspiration. But then I've drawn a lot of inspiration from my students. One in particular and I'm still extremely good friends with him, is Professor Rylam. Now he's also a visitor at IITM quite regularly. And I had the privilege of being his master's and PhD supervisor. He later rose to become the vice chancellor of one of our universities in South Africa. So he's gone right to the top of his profession. And he has always inspired me and challenged me. He's partly Indian, comes from Indian roots. Because he's a free thinker. He doesn't follow just the normal line of things. So I've drawn a lot of inspiration from my students, actually. Also, as a committed Christian believer, I've drawn a lot of inspiration just from my relationship with God. Felt that my life was being guided by Him all along the way. So, divine, human mixture. My wife has been a tremendous support. as well. So lots of people, I think.
Sir,
Yes.
since you were president of Rylam.
Yes.
Sir, can you tell us about your tenure, like as a presidency that you had?
The sort of experience I had as a president.
I mean,
Rylam.
you had a transition from member to a president.
Yes.
So
Let me tell you a bit about Rylam. When you live in the most southwesterly corner of Africa, you're fairly remote from the world. Nobody comes there on their way to somewhere else. So I realized that if I didn't try and join up with an organization that could bring me into contact with the people who were doing the research, who were writing the papers, I would more or less just be left there on my own, and there would not be an opportunity to expand in terms of international collaboration. So I joined Rylam quite young, and I was just a member, but then I joined some of their technical committees, and suddenly I was sitting around the same table with the people who were writing the papers, who were writing the books, the names that I saw, and was drawing my own information from. So I could actually talk to them as human beings. I found that they were just ordinary people like I was, very approachable, very pleasant people. And from there it sort of went on. I was then asked to join some of the sort of governance committees of Rylam. And I always joke, in South Africa we have a thing called affirmative action, equity, the sort of equity, with the change in the country, political change, and making sure that people who were previously disadvantaged are brought into opportunities now. Sort of the equity type people. And I've always said that I'm the equivalent in Rylam, because Rylam was very Eurocentric, based in Europe, very Franco-centric. It was a French organization, and they wanted to expand Rylam worldwide. And they said, so if we want to expand Rylam worldwide, we need a non-European president, somebody who's not from Europe. So they looked at me and they said, we think you should be that guy. So I became the first president of Rylam that didn't come from Europe. There had been some from Latin America, but basically they had always come from Europe. So I think I was just at the right place at the right time, and they thought I would do okay. So I kind of almost got pushed into that position. I didn't think I was really worthy of it, but they thought I was, and I must say it was a wonderful experience. It really was a wonderful experience to lead this international scientific organization at the highest level. Great honor to do that. And there I met so many interesting people that are still my friends today.
So if not Rylam, where would you have been in your academic stage right now?
Well, Rylam, I became, after graduating with a bachelor's, I worked for about 6 years. I did my master's in 1 year, but I worked for 6 or 7 years as an engineer. And then, they talk about an academic bug, a thing that bites you like a mosquito. I think the academic bug bit me, and I felt that I'd like to go back to university. So they were very kind. They took me back to my alma mater, University of Witwatersrand, gave me a position as a lecturer. And then I rose through the ranks and then moved to the University of Cape Town about 13 years after that, where they offered me a professorship, a full professorship. And I've been there for 30 years. So I sort of made my way through the academic ranks. Rylam was, of course, I didn't have to belong to Rylam. Rylam is a voluntary thing. You belong if you want to, but you belong if you want to advance your science, because Rylam is the kind of place where you can really dig into the science and the knowledge and come to grips with some, advanced material and push the field forward. That's what's really wonderful about Rylam. So Rylam was not essential to my career, but it was a tremendous boost to it, because it kind of gave me international status, allowed me to network internationally. I mean, in many regards, the reason why I've come to India is because Professor Getu from IITM, he and I were in the presidency of Rylam together. I was the past president, he was the incoming vice president, so we did a lot together in Rylam. Professor Manan Santanam was in Rylam. I got to know him there, although I actually got to know him before that. So in some way my trips to India have been a little bit linked to Rylam. So Rylam for me became that kind of international association which I could branch out and collaborate with people all over the world.
It's really good to I'm fascinated by your journey, from being the Rylam president to apart from this, sir, what advice would you like to give to an institution? Because since Africa is a very diverse country, and I believe India is also as diverse as Africa, to bring inclusiveness for the departments or institution, any advice you'd like to give?
Yes, of course, Africa is many countries. I mean, Africa's got 50 plus countries in it, and it's also the product of a colonial past, much as India is. So we also are dealing with the post-colonial period, to some extent like you are, although I think you are further ahead than we are in the post-colonial period. And South Africa is a diverse country. I mean, India is very diverse. I don't know how many languages you have here, many, many. We have 11 official languages and many dialects. We have people from many diverse backgrounds, African, people like me, ex-European. We have a fairly large Indian population that came to work in sugarcane fields many years ago. We have quite a large Chinese population who came to work. So we also have got a great mix of people. And that diversity is both a strength and a weakness. The strength is that you learn from others because people see things differently from you when they come from a diverse culture and they come with different thinking. The difficulty is how to integrate those people and help them to work together. It's always a little bit of a challenge. So, so I think in the sort of parallels between South Africa and India are in some ways quite similar, but in some ways they're not similar. I mean, India is diverse, but it's diverse within a unity. All of you are Indians and have been Indians from forever. In South Africa, we are Africans and Europeans and Indians and Chinese of that background, but we haven't been that. I mean, I'm originally from a European background, but I regard myself as an African. But our cultures are very different, and it's how to blend those cultures. And that's part of the struggle we're going through at the moment. And it's just part of growing up as a nation. We're a very young nation in regard to the democratic transition, which occurred only in 1994 when we became a fully democratic country. So we're in many ways a very young country and still trying to find our way in the world. But I do find that growing up in a diverse culture, a diverse country, a little bit like you do in India and like I have, gives you tremendous strength when you get into the rest of the world. Because very often in some of the developed countries, the US, maybe less US, but Europe, people struggle with diversity. And they struggle to know how to sort of work across diverse boundaries. I think it's something that we've learned how to do because we've had to. So even in Rylam, there was a case where we had two technical committees that were really not getting on well together, and we had to somehow solve these problems. And I think coming from where I had come from, which was very much a case of trying to resolve conflicts, helped me to do that in that circumstance, which maybe I wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I think coming out of a diverse background is something to cherish and something to value and something to appreciate, because it gives you a sense that there's a whole other world out there that is not your world, and many other worlds out there, and they're all rich with meaning. They're rich with background. They're rich with insights, and so on. So I think we should be very grateful that we are in diverse countries like we are.
Yes, sir. I mean, looking at India, we get to know how much diversity is, and we have to embrace the diversity. So my next question is, how do you stay current with advancements and technologies?
How do I stay current? At my age, with great difficulty.
No, technology.
Yeah.
I mean, since we are
knowledge is growing at such a great rate that, to be honest, I struggle to keep up. There is so much. When I was a student, the problem was finding enough information. We actually had to go into a library with real books. We had to go into the archives down in the basement. We had to dig the book, take the books off the shelf, very often they hadn't been taken off the shelf for years. You could smell. They were musty. And then we didn't have photocopy machines, not even photocopying. We had to write everything by hand on our notes, and then we had to transcribe that to our... We didn't even have... If we were lucky, we had a typewriter. We didn't even have computers or not the kind you have today. So there was another era where we struggled to find enough information to help us get into the fields we wanted to work in. Now, you have too much information. I mean, it just comes at you relentlessly. If you want to, if I happen to be editor of one of the cement and concrete journals. So we're getting around about up to 10 or 20 papers a day coming to the journal for publication. So, the rate of production of knowledge has increased tremendously. So it's not as if it's difficult to keep up, because that's all accessible now through modern media. The problem is to sift it out, is to say what is really useful, what is really good, and what is just, oh, that's interesting, but it's not going to be of much value. In other words, how to distinguish between really good work and work that is just fairly ordinary, if you know what I mean. And the way you do that is that you eventually get to know the authors and the groups of authors who work together and really produce good stuff, the leaders in their field. So you need to know who the leaders in your field are. You read their papers and their publications. And if possible, even keep in touch with them. That would certainly be one way. But you have to keep learning all the time. The moment you stop learning, you're going backwards in today's world. And there are so many new things coming up: artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and also things like self-assembling structures and self-sensing structures, all the rest of it. So it's actually quite difficult to keep up in a broad area. But as I said, there's no shortage of being able to do that, because the media is there for you. It's how to sift it out. It's how to be discriminatory in a way as to get the information you really need. But keep learning all your life. Keep learning. Never stop learning. If you stop learning, you'll die.
Yes, I will take this as a takeaway today. Since you talked about published, how you're very published author. So, what do you have to say about concrete durability? Since you worked on one of the papers.
Well, that it's what I can say is it's a fascinating field. As a civil engineer, the one course that most civil engineers don't enjoy at university, I don't know about you, is first year chemistry. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same. But when you get into durability, you suddenly have to go back to your chemistry. You've got to go back to your physics. You've got to go back to the basics, because you're not dealing now with the normal things that engineers are dealing with around mechanical. But that's been part of what's so enjoyable about it, sort of digging into the field that I probably wasn't very good at. So durability is a very broad term, and it really is difficult to define, because you cannot say that something is durable or non-durable unless you refer to the environment within which it has to function. So, this concrete over here may be quite durable, but if you put it down on the shore at the sea and left it exactly that same there for 10 years, it may be in a terrible condition. It may be corroding, spalling, cracking. So here it's quite durable, but there it may not be durable. So you have to relate it to the environment, you have to relate it to the material, you have to relate it to the expected life of the structure, and you have to understand deterioration. So durability is in effect understanding deterioration, and then turning that knowledge to benefit in terms of preventing that deterioration, or slowing down that deterioration, or designing in ways and means to prevent the deterioration from becoming a problem in the life of the structure. So the durability journey has been a very fascinating one for me. And it was a choice I made fairly soon after my PhD. I'd worked in another field. I'd done concrete fracture, and then a few years after that, I said, not sure I want to do fracture for the rest of my life. But durability looks interesting, and indeed it has been very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, also since we are working towards the advancement of more sustainability, since as youth we are focused towards sustainability, what do you think can be a potential replacement for cement, since it is the largest producer of carbon dioxide?
What can be a potential replacement for cement? I don't see any potential replacement for cement in the next several decades, 20 or 30 years at least. However, what I do see is the cements that we use will change tremendously. So when you talk about cement, you're talking about Portland cement. And Portland cement is as successful as it is because it works so well. And it's a very robust material. You can build the most sophisticated structure in the world. You can build a Burj Khalifa or a magnificent cable-stayed bridge out of concrete at a high level, ultra-high performance concrete. But you can go to the village over the weekend, your own villages, and somebody can be building a path. They can be laying a path to their house. They can be building a little room. They could be using concrete to improve their dwelling. What do they understand about cement? Absolutely nothing. They just know you take some cement, you take some water, you put some gravel in there, maybe a bit of sand, you mix it all up, and there, wonderful, it works. So my one colleague calls it the most democratic material in the world because anybody can use it. But yet at the sophisticated level, a little bit like we heard in the lecture today, it's a very, very sophisticated material. And the range of use is tremendous. So it's not going to be replaced in the near future at all. It's the only material that can meet the needs of the developing world in terms of housing, transportation, basic infrastructure, water, wastewater, the whole range of things that we have to do to serve a growing population, urbanizing population. We can't do it in any other way for the moment. But we have to change the way we use cement. We have to use less of it in our structures. We have to blend it much more with supplementary cementitious materials. We've got to look into those things. We've got to change the codes. We've got to convince the authorities that we've got to do this kind of thing so that we can bring down that carbon footprint and make it, in that way, a more sustainable material. But I don't see it being replaced in the near future. We've just got to make it, we've just got to use it a lot more intelligently.
Yes, sir. So, one key advice you'd like to give our viewers, civil?
Yeah, one piece of advice. Well, never stop asking questions. If you don't understand something, say why. How does this work? Never stop questioning. Never take everything for granted. Even your professors, they tell you this. Check it out. Because life is about learning continual learning. It's about exploring, it's about finding out. It's about realizing that the world around us is such a fascinating place to be explored. And as engineers, we are very, very fortunate because we're given the tools to understand a lot of that world that we live in. We're given tools of science. We're not scientists, but we use the tools of science to understand the world we live in. And we're not only given that, we're given the tremendous privilege of providing for the basic needs of humanity. Civil engineers have, over the centuries, provided what society has needed for a better life. They've provided transportation. They've provided clean water. Civil engineers have saved more lives than doctors ever have because they provide the clean water to the cities. As you know, without clean water, people will die in their thousands. So we're able to take that water and transform it again. So we're very fortunate in that. Just keep learning, keep questioning.
Thank you, sir. That's it for this segment. I feel very overwhelmed to be here present in front of you taking your interview.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.